Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Marcus Woodard, Marketing Programs Manager here at Allego. Let's go through some housekeeping items. For attending today's webinar, those that provided a valid U.S. mailing address will receive a free copy of Mastering Virtual Selling, Orchestrating Sales Success, written by two of Allego's co-founders, Yu-Chun Lee and Mark McNacka, as well as sales guru Tony Geary. If you didn't provide your address, go ahead and do so through the questions tab, and I'll be sure to send you a book. We also have a special offer at the end of today's webinar from Factor 8, so stay tuned. And at the conclusion of the webinar, there is a brief 3-question survey that helps us improve these events. We value your feedback, so please take a moment to complete the survey. This presentation is being recorded, and an on-demand recording will be emailed in the next day or two. And we've also reserved time today at the end of the session for a little Q&A. So feel free to add questions during the discussion, and I can chime in whenever we have one that's relevant. So I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Ted Martin. Ted is the Chief Revenue Officer at Factor 8 and is a proven revenue executive, sales coach, and operations leader with over 12 years hands-on experience. Over the course of his career, Ted has built 14 sales and revenue teams, which have achieved notable results, and established himself as a subject matter expert in building growth-focused revenue teams. Welcome, Ted. And we also have Jake Miller. Jake joined Allego after the commercial launch to help establish product marketing and lead ongoing strategic use case development and commercialization efforts. Jake is passionate about sales performance and incorporates his experience as a salesperson in the commission-only high-ticket retail world into his approach and product marketing at Allego. Jake, welcome.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, thanks. And actually, I'm going to shoot it over to you.
Okay, awesome. Appreciate the intro. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Ted, especially for being here. Really excited to have you on this webinar. So everyone, the topic today, best practices for coaching and promoting your top reps. It's really cool that we have Ted here today because obviously, you know, promoting and coaching reps, everything has changed in this new environment now where we're so much more virtual. And even for those of you who your organization maybe is starting to make the transition back to more of a hybrid, still our salespeople are still having to sell virtually, right? The buyers are at a place now where they're not wanting to take in-person meetings as much. So whether we are trying to bring everybody back into the office or not, right, our buyers are going to dictate how our sellers, you know, interact with them. So Ted's specialty and what Factor 8 does is it's a collection of proven revenue leaders who their focus is on helping teams to learn how to sell virtually, helping managers learn how to do this virtually, build teams, coach them, promote. So we're really excited to have you here, Ted. Anything you wanted to kind of say up front about Factor 8 or about anything to do with the topic before we kind of jump in?
No, just you know, thanks for the plug there, Jake. Honestly, we're just excited to be taking a part in this. I think one of the things, you know, we talk to probably seven or eight revenue leaders a day, whether it's current clients or, you know, potential clients. And one of the biggest challenges right now outside of recruiting is retaining your top talent. And there was research that was put out by SBI, Sales Benchmark Index, I think it was last week, where they showed that the number one tool that you have access to retain your top talent, it was like 28% of top reps that left said that long-term growth within an organization was the number one reason why they left. So you know, this is a huge topic that people are really paying attention to now, as well as like very leading revenue leaders are focusing on. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about this.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's exciting. We're in a really kind of, there's a time of a lot of change going on right now, and obviously, you know, the more that we can bring new approaches and practices to the mix when it comes to selling and building teams. There's a lot of opportunity. So it's cool.
Sure.
All right, so I think we'll go ahead and jump right in. And everybody, I think we're going to take a little bit of Q&A at the end, but also feel free to just pop in questions in the chat. First thing that we're going to do is go ahead and I'm going to launch a poll here. And Marcus, if you wanted to jump in, we want to kind of kick off and just get everybody's feel for how often are you coaching your reps, or how often are the folks who in your organization who are supposed to be coaching them doing so? Marcus, do I go ahead and just hit the pause here?
Actually, the poll's on, so
oh, it's good. Okay,
people are
awesome.
chiming in. We'll give it a couple more seconds here.
This is obviously, yeah, one of the big challenges in this new environment is getting more time to do this, and coaching is a human to human activity, right? So it's about how do we do this in a remote environment. So we'd love to hear from everybody.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll, and then we'll share the results here.
Share the result. Okay, cool. Let's see.
So it looks like 8% said every day, 1 to 2 times per week there was 54%, and then 1 to 2 times per month is 25%, and 1 to 2 times per year 13%.
Okay, so the majority are in between the 1 to 2 times per week, 1 to 2 times per month, and that's to be expected. I think that since the pandemic hit and us going into the remote environment, I think that we've seen definitely across a lot of the organizations we've been working with a little bit of a dip in the coaching that's been going on. So yeah, that's what we're excited to kind of talk to you about today, is a little bit how we can mitigate that and things of that nature. Go ahead with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Just one point on that too. For everyone that answered that poll, first off, thank you for doing so. One thing to think about is the quality and the consistency at which you're coaching people, right? So you're going to hear, you're going to read things on LinkedIn, you're going to read, blogs and stuff like that say you need to be doing X amount of coaching each day and each week, or each month. And the reality is, you need to take, like Jake mentioned before, you need to take a human approach to the way in which you work with your team. And the first thing is, if you're being told you need to coach every day, well, are you spending 15 minutes coaching or an hour coaching every day? And what's the quality of that interaction with your rep, as well as your manager? And on top of that, when you're doing that, you want to stay consistent, right? And so making sure that your consistency aligns with what the human on the other end, how often they want to be coached and how often they need to be coached, is extremely important. So I just wanted to put that out there because, you can answer these polls and see, wow, people are doing it every day. Do I need to be doing that? And oftentimes you really don't, but we can dig deeper into that later, Jake.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not just about the amount of coaching sessions you can do, but it's about the quality, especially given coaching being something that, human topic of human to human connection, and this is about career growth for the employee. So over coaching can be it can make an employee feel, a rep feel like they're somehow in the hot seat or something like that too. So it's about the quality as well. That's a great point. So I want to kind of just jump right in, Ted, and for everybody on the line, this today we've got about a 30-minute session here. It's going to be mostly me asking Ted questions, because I really want, Ted's got a real kind of bird's eye view of how sales organizations, virtual sales organizations, are being led, coached, ran, built. So that's what this structure is going to kind of be. But this first point here, coaching is powerful. We know it. It's a key performance driver, probably the key performance driver for a sales team. But 47% of all sales managers spend less than 30 minutes per week coaching their rep. Now, again, like Ted pointed out, it is about the quality, not just about the quantity. But one of the biggest, consistently one of the biggest things that we've heard from organizations is that managers struggle. So Ted, can you kind of speak to, like, how often are you seeing like really, best in class kind of managers doing coaching, and how does that kind of play out? How do you think about that?
Yeah, good question, Jake. So the first thing is figuring out what your coaching plan is going to be. So the first step is looking at your team, right? Most managers have 8 to 10 reps on their team, maybe less. There's only they say 40 hours in a work week, but that can be 50 or 60 nowadays. The reality is figuring out, okay, how much bandwidth do you have on a weekly basis? And then where's your time going to be most effectively spent? There's numerous studies out there that say, you don't need to coach your A reps, coach your B and your C reps. And ultimately, like yes, from a performance perspective, you want to focus on that, but you also want to look at how often do my reps want to be coached? What do they want to be coached on? And based on what they want to be coached on and what they need to be coached on, your frequency can change, right? So if you've got a sales rep that is doing, they need help with deal strategy, that's something that can be done on a weekly, every other week basis. But if you've got another rep that needs help with prospecting skills or things like that, that's something that can be done on a more daily, weekly basis, where it's something that you're going to be making those prospecting calls on a daily basis, and you'll have more to actually interact on. And so again, going back to the original point, it's not something where you have to be doing things on a weekly basis. It's based on what you're coaching against. Provide your team with the relevant time period that's necessary to the skills that you're looking to improve.
That's interesting. So it's not just about saying, okay, I'm a sales manager, I need to make sure that I'm checking the box to coach a certain amount of minutes per week for every rep. It's more about, okay, let's think through what are the different, we need to assess everybody's competency levels, I suppose. That's really where and build a coaching plan based on that.
It's like coaching has become the question in an interview where they ask you, how many sales books have you read this year? Right? Like, who cares? What I want to know is how many books have you read that you've actually applied something to, right? And so that, the quality of the coaching engagement for both the person that's coaching as well as the person that's receiving the coaching is extremely important. And everyone can say that they're coaching, but what's the return on that coaching and time investment?
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, that's great. So moving on here. So when coaching, when coaching skills exceed just some stats here. When coaching skills exceed expectations. So when we talked about reps, one of the big discussions now and one of the big challenges organizations are facing is how do we make sure that, aside from hiring, how do we make sure that we keeping the reps, right? And having their manager and career development all playing into coaching is such a big thing. So when coaching skills exceed expectations, 95% of reps meet the quota. When coaching skills need improvement, only 84.5% hit the quota. This is a stat from CSO Insights. I just think it's incredibly compelling. It just shows that dedicating your to a formalized coaching program, and and even thinking in terms of, okay, how do we bring in some experts like someone like Factor 8 to say, okay, what are in this new world, how are we doing coaching? So Ted, I think another question is around kind of like personalization of coaching and making sure that managers are providing a personalized experience, but while also providing the experience that as a company we've kind of said, okay, this is how our standard for how we do coaching. So can you kind of speak to how folks on the line can think about starting to kind of bring in more personalization and coaching to kind of drive up that retention of these new employees?
Yeah, for sure, Jake. So a couple of things. First, have any of us asked our teams how they want to be coached? Right? That is literally number one, right? You'll run into some sales leaders that say everyone needs to be coached, and I agree with that. Again, the frequency may differ, but if you've got a top performing rep that you're not going to treat them the same way that you treat like a new hire or someone that's underperforming, right? So being able to have that conversation, and literally, like, for the most part, everybody on your team should be an adult, right? So like we can talk to them and figure out how they want to be coached. That's kind of like where I think the key is like being able to understand what is driving that coaching engagement from the rep perspective, but also from the leader's perspective, driving the coaching experience to what are the measurable KPIs that we're tracking the success of our engagement and how impactful it is to the rep's improvement. And then the last thing that I'll bring up that we've kind of neglected to this point is the importance of second level leaders coaching managers, right? A lot of times we take for granted that sales leaders actually know how to coach, they know when to coach, and they're doing their job effectively because they just know how to do it. But I would venture to guess, like most of us that are on this call, we haven't received formalized training on how to be a sales leader or how to be a sales coach. And so looking to second level leaders and our bosses to coach us is extremely important.
And Ted, how has that changed? We talked a little bit about kind of conversation intelligence technology and using technology now more with, in the virtual environment. How do you feel like this new environment that we're in has kind of changed this as far as both managers having a better feel for the kinds of coaching that their reps want, being able to get that feedback, but then also sales leaders being able to do coaching to managers? And have you seen technology making improvements here?
So definitely technology is making improvements here. What I would tell you though is that it's not happening on the inside, within inside sales. So what I mean by that is for people in inside sales or virtual sales that have been doing it for a while, whether you're on site or remote, you've most likely been using conversation intelligence or at least just call recordings, right? So maybe the frequency has increased in which you're coaching your reps, but you're used to this technology. Where we're seeing a lot of this is in field sales, right? So people have been forced into virtual. Believe it or not, a lot of field sales leaders and reps are scared to no end about selling over the phone. And so that's where they've kind of been diving into the use of call recordings and conversation intelligence, where originally it was like, oh, that's kind of like a call center type tool. Now people are having to embrace it because we've been in this virtual world. And to your point earlier, just because we're ready to get back on the road doesn't mean our customers and prospects are ready to welcome us back into the office.
Right, that's interesting. So it's now we've got more of the field sales process happening over the video conference. So it's like, okay, we can actually, so you're seeing more coaching happening to those kinds of calls, using those kinds of calls to say, okay, here, you could have maybe done a better job running the meeting, or maybe, make better eye contact with the camera instead of looking at the computer screen. Is it kind of things like that?
Yeah, 100%. I would say where the biggest, where a lot of our field folks are focused is on top of funnel and running discovery and value demonstration to earn the right to get into the office is typically where, and that's mostly for new business, a little bit of existing business as well, like account management. But the coaching is more around the skill component versus, like, hopefully at this point, most people have figured out how to use like a Zoom or a GoToWebinar or something like that. But there are people that are coaching on those types of skills as well.
Yeah, so because it changes, right? Sales is sales, but it's a new medium to do selling in. So selling over video conference, there is a whole skill set over and above just being able to run the kind of technology. That's great. So I think I'll keep going here. This is just a stat. McKinsey, 80% of buyers now prefer virtual engagements, and companies that add the human touch to digital sales achieve twice the return to shareholders. This was a big thing that we've seen across a lot of organizations, is a focus on now, obviously with the buying process having become so much more virtualized, even in B2B, like Ted, like you're talking about with the even in field sales roles, it's like now there's a push to go virtual. This just makes it that much more important. So I guess one question is, as far as the kind of the coaching, the kinds of the virtual selling skills for the field sales teams, like what are you seeing as far as the different kind of, just the comfort level, I guess, across the different organizations that you're working with? Because virtual selling is now, it's, using more tools, as part of the sales process. So what kinds of changes have you seen there?
Yeah, good question. So the change, I mean, the biggest change is that we're now coaching people in the field, right? If you think about this, a lot of your typical account executives that are considered field sales, you wouldn't really coach them that often. Like maybe you would go on a ride along, but like your coaching engagement with them would be like you're the VP or the manager or the director participating in their sales meeting with an important client, right? And so you would potentially take over. Now it's actually a valuable engagement that's back and forth, where you're giving more tactics and tips on how to improve. The use of recordings has drastically increased. And I think that's something that has, you mentioned conversation intelligence. That is something that is driving a change or a shift in the idea of the value of coaching for folks in the field, but also increasingly driving the importance of coaching for inside sales as well. So just a couple of thoughts on that, but I think the openness to using call recordings, and if you don't have call recordings, doing effective role plays or being able to jump in on calls with your team and not take over those calls, but actually do it as a sales coach effectively, is something that is increasing as well.
That's interesting. It's almost like, as part of this, some of these technologies, that there's like a built-in process change where managers, it may be more likely to give, it may be, because you see so often managers want to jump in and save the deal every time, take over the call. So some of these technologies where you're coaching after the fact, it actually forces it, so that way they have to just be quiet and let the person fail if they're going to fail. That's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. I think, and I also want to put this out there, because you don't have to have a robust tech stack in order to be able to be an effective coach. We work with a ton of companies that, for whatever reason, maybe they don't have the budget, or maybe they just have a very old CRM, or maybe they don't even have a CRM in some cases, right? So like the idea that you need to have XYZ tools in order to be an effective coach, please don't think that. Like literally, you just need to have an open mind and communication with your team to figure out what are some creative ways, if we don't have a robust tech stack, that we can be effective coaches, and you do it together.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'll say this as the technology provider here. The technology is just a means to an end with coaching.
Right.
Coaching is the process. The whole subject is around the process there. So yeah, that's incredibly important to keep in mind. All right, so we'll continue on here. We're gonna the next part. We've just got about 5 minutes left. So I think we can actually. I think we'll probably skip over this second poll here, and we'll just kind of jump right in, since we've only got a couple minutes left. So I'm gonna just keep on rolling here. But this next part, it's around understanding which reps should be promoted to manager, which ones want to be promoted to manager, which ones would have the competency. That becomes more of a challenge in the virtual environment, just like everything else. Any of these human-to-human things, understanding a person's motivations for, it's all becomes more challenging when you're not in person. So Ted, I guess if you could kind of speak to a little bit around, what have you seen as far as best practices for being able to identify, when reps are ready to be promoted, which track they should be on, is for any sales leaders out there, sales managers.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll try to be quick on this. So a couple of things. Identifying the right person. Um, your A players are not always going to be the right people, right? Like when you're a top salesperson, the qualities and characteristics of a top salesperson do not necessarily mean that they're going to be a great sales coach and sales manager. Um, the, uh, the next thing is, do they do the job the right way, right? So if you've got a top performer, but you listen to their calls or you watch the way they do their job, and you're like, I love you for hitting your number and exceeding your number, but I don't want other people, like it only works for you. That's not going to be a good fit, right? So what's most important is looking for the performers that do the job the right way and have the characteristics of, potentially working with new hires without even being asked, or doing the job where they pay attention to their KPIs, they run an effective discovery call the way you want them to. They essentially do everything, not necessarily by the book, but they play the game the right way, and more importantly, they take part in your team engagements, right? Because that's what you want as a leader. So that's really around identifying those folks. The other thing to think about, though, is that don't make your promotion paths just going into management. Believe it or not, for sellers, not everyone should go into management, like I mentioned before, but promoting people, only providing a promotion path that gets someone into sales management, that might hurt their career, right? Try to identify opportunities for them to become a more complex salesperson, right? If it's an SMB going to mid-market and then enterprise, or if you've got an enterprise team and you're trying to figure out, how do I promote this, do a micro promotion for this account executive, maybe give them an even more specific book of business to focus on that's more strategic, right? So really thinking outside the box around how you promote and what you promote folks into, because you can only have but so many managers.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a good thing to think about as far as there's Ram Charan is a business HBR person, talks about high PO versus high pro, how any employee in an organization is either going to be one of the two, more of a high pro being more high professional, somebody who's
Right.
wants to continue bettering their craft. High PO, high potential leader, somebody who wants to be leading a team. So it's interesting. You completely have to segment out, and we've seen, it's cool that you say, providing that promotion path for folks not trying to go into managers. I mean, it made me think of our sales team. We've got one of our sales leaders is Melissa Plunkett Gomez. She's on the executive team, but she's an individual contributor still, right? So it's always about how you got to make sure that you're setting out the right path. So that's a
Yep.
really good insight.
And you only get to that point, though, if you communicate with your reps, right? Understanding what those motivators are for them, that's the key, is communication.
Right, because not everybody wants to be managing a team, but
Exactly.
everybody wants to be continuing to grow. So yeah, that's great. These are a couple just last kind of questions here. Determining the right reps to promote. Can you kind of just go through these like one by one, just kind of 30,000-foot view, Ted, just on you guys' thoughts on this?
For sure. So again, are there certain KPIs to look for? Yes. But it's specific to each person's business, right? And the role within each business. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you always need to look at the conversion ratio of discovery to stage 2 or demo, because it's not blanket like that, right? What you need to do is sit down and identify, okay, what are the KPIs that really drive our business and our team, and that's going to be the thing that I focus on with my folks. When they're ready, when they start doing the job before they get it, right? So if it's someone going into a management role, it's someone that's on their own going out and coaching and helping new hires and things like that. If it's somebody that's going from an SDR to an account executive, it's someone that is on their prospecting calls, is probably doing more qualification than everybody else, right? And the best way to test their abilities is teach them how to do their job before they get it. Too many times when you promote people internally, you interview them the same way you would interview an external candidate. You already know that this is a person that you like, hopefully, but you already know that they're a good cultural fit. Start teaching them the skills that they need for their next job and use that as the interview process, because then when you do that, they're starting to get a sense of what that next job is going to look like. And more importantly, you're able to see through coaching how they're going to be able to pick up on those new skills.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really at the end of the day, every single thing I feel like comes back to you've got to, as a sales manager or sales leader, you've just got to have you've got to have a pulse on your team. You've got to really be able to understand their motivations, understand them as people, to be able to do any of this stuff right. It sounds like
100%.
That's awesome. Okay, so so we're at time here. Wanted to just kind of leave off with these 10 tips for promoting the right reps. And Ted, did you want to kind of just quickly just list these off? You know, they're just with quick little descriptions of each.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So the quotas and KPIs, right? Obviously, you're looking for people that exceed quota and are doing the job the right way. But it's all about consistency, right? So just make sure that you're not having somebody that shoots it out the roof, month one, but then they bake it months 2 and 3, right? So like pay attention to the consistency around that. Regarding sales process, it's all about not necessarily how they align to your sales process, but do they sell the way you want them to sell, right? Do they sell the right way? And is that something that you want to have replicated across the team? Because a lot of times that's what sales leaders do. The asking for promotion piece, that's kind of interesting, because I know as a leader, oftentimes we think everybody's asking for a promotion, but are they doing it the right way? And being able to, and are they ready for it? And are they open to having that conversation with you around self-identifying themselves when they're ready and when they're not? So I think those are some of the key takeaways, but we'll also be sharing these with everybody after the fact with some brief descriptions that they can check into.
Okay, awesome. Great. Excellent. So I think that wraps it up for us with the content on this. Marcus, do we have, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anybody has questions, please feel free to send them in. We'd love to answer any questions for you. But Marcus, did you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I've left about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So, I mean, Ted, if you wanted to finish these up, you're more than welcome to. I do have a couple questions from the audience, but you're more than welcome to just kind of wrap these 10 up if you wanted to speak to them.
Yeah, I mean, the communication skills, I feel like I've probably beat that one down a little bit. So I think we've got a good idea on that. And then not promoting your A reps, right? Again, being able to understand, do they have the skill that aligns to a management role? But if you're an A rep promoting them into another individual contributor role, like that's a good thing, right? So think creatively about identifying new roles that they can jump into. I mentioned the thing about helping out the new hires, especially if you're jumping into a management role. Are people going outside of their normal responsibilities to help out your new folks? And that kind of aligns to the mentorship of the existing team as well, right? Are they going outside of their normal responsibilities to do so? I think the biggest piece is this cultural side, like so you see trust and likability. But it's do they drive the culture that you want within your organization? And do you trust that they actually believe in it, right? Versus just walking the walk, or talking the talk. Are they actually walking the walk and believe in the culture that you're trying to drive towards? So yeah, and like I said, we'll email these out to everybody as well.
That's
okay,
awesome.
let's take some questions from the audience. I've got Patrice here. She said, are you talking about creating a career ladder?
100%. Yeah. So if I'm understanding correctly, career ladder is like, kind of like a career path, right? Where maybe you go from an SDR to an SMB or mid-market account executive to maybe an enterprise account executive. That's 100% correct. Yeah.
Awesome. And then William, he kind of teed it up for you, Jake. Are there any tools that you use to assess a salesperson that could be used for coaching as well?
I feel like Ted should maybe, I can answer that too as well, of course. we build
Sure.
those
So Allego is one, right? So being able to, from Allego's side, being able to use the coaching tools as well as the conversation intelligence is huge. But I think the tools themselves, like, it's extremely important to have access to call recordings if you can, and to be able to, on top of that, consistently coach and train your team. And consistency doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be every week. It can be every other week. But consistency is key. We don't want our teams to be coming in and saying, okay, here goes Ted. This month he's going to be coaching us, and then next month we're not going to hear from him. You know, so like the consistency needs to be there around how you use those tools. So just a couple of thoughts there.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's about it's about the process of coaching, not just the tools. I mean, that's the key at the end of the day. The tools are a means to an end, but having a formalized coaching program, having things broken out. Okay, here's how, here is my coaching plan for each of the different reps based on their actual needs and their skill gaps. It's really that is the focus. The tools to do this virtually, it helps you deliver. But to really deliver good coaching, it's all this stuff that we're talking about here. Great question.
So I've got two more questions, and if we didn't get to your question, I apologize. We'll get those out to you, get them answered. This one was from a little bit earlier in the presentation. Ted touched on a great point. People are doing coaching without receiving coaching training. What resources do you guys recommend for us to improve the coaching skills to better coach our sales team?
So one, before you look at any training or anything like that, right, take a human approach to the interaction, right? And this is the first thing that I tell anybody, even when they come to us for management training, is talk to your team, right? Like, what's the quality of the engagements that you currently have today? What do they like about it? What do they not? Are you giving them answers versus asking them questions that are going to help them figure out the answers that they need in their skill development? We're all humans at the end of the day, right? And being able to have that communication with your team is extremely important. One of the things that I've done with my teams is that we'll do DISC assessments, and I'll sit down with my individual folks that work for me, and I'll talk about how we like to communicate. So that's something that before training you can just do with your team members to understand what's going to get the most out of them and how they know to communicate with you. The second thing, shameless plug for Factor 8, but we teach sales leaders how to run one-on-ones. We teach them how to do coaching, how to run pipeline meetings, how to run team meetings. So we do have formalized training. And if you'd like, please feel free to reach out and I can talk to you a little bit about that, where we'll work with clients, privately and do that, or we also run custom boot camps that folks can go through for formalized management training.
Great. So one last one, and then we'll kind of close down here. When is it time to let go of a rep?
It's going to vary based on your business. Okay. What I will tell you is that consistency goes on both sides, right? If someone is consistently not performing and they are consistently not doing the things that you ask them to do, then it is time to let them go. One tip, document everything, right? In some cases, when you're running a one-on-one, have them send you their notes from the meetings that you have with them versus you sending them notes. If you start that early, it makes it very, they get used to it, and you have documentation from them about what's working and what's not. And it makes it easier for you because you've got a ton of one-on-ones that you have to run. And to get more specific on the question itself, the reason why I say it differs on when to let go of a rep is because if you run a very transactional business or a short sale where you're able to sell your tools in 1 to 2 days versus you've got a 12-month sales cycle, you may need to put someone on a 12-month sales cycle on a longer term, 3 or 6 months PIP to get them a fair chance at being able to perform versus in an SDR function or a transactional sales process, you could figure that out in a month or so. So I think the two things that I will say versus just giving you like a concrete time period is that document everything, and 2, make sure that you've got a certain level of consistency where they haven't been performing and it aligns to your sales process and the time to close.
All right, Jake, you want to go to the next slide here? If you're looking for tactical tips and rep training for yourself, this is the special offer from Factor 8. It's a 6-week masterclass virtual sales training program that combines e-learning in the award-winning training platform, the Sales Bar with virtual instructor-led training sessions. Factor 8 offers 4 different masterclasses on prospecting, discovery, deal progression, and closing. Use promo code Allego for $100 off any class, and you can learn more by going to the website you see here. We'll also send this out. If you need any more details, we'll put you in contact with Ted and Amy from Factor 8. If you want to go,
I was just going to say, Marcus, like if anybody's interested in like a management boot camp or something like that, we can also apply it to that too. So just feel free to reach out. We'll be here for you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for joining us today. Jake, if you want to go to the next slide too. Upon leaving the webinar, remember there's a 3-question survey and the recording will be sent out either today or tomorrow. And special thanks to Ted and Jake. Thanks everyone for joining, and that concludes today's webinar.
Thank you, Marcus. Thanks so much, Ted.
You got it, man.
Thank you, everybody.